Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that's been kind of a holy grail in AI for, well, I guess forever, right? The Turing test.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those concepts that captures the imagination. I mean, who hasn't wondered if machines could ever truly think like us?
And Alan Turing, way back in 1950, he gave us this incredibly elegant yet deceptively simple way to try and figure that out, the Turing test.
Right. A human judge, let's call them the interrogator, is chatting through text only with two hidden entities. One is a human, the other is a machine. And the interrogator's job is to crack the code, figure out who's the human, who's the machine.
And if that machine can fool the interrogator, convince them that it's the real human, well, that's a pass. A Turing test pass. It's like the AI equivalent of winning an Oscar. Right.
It's certainly been a benchmark that's sparked countless debates. I mean, for over 75 years now, people have been arguing about what it really tells us, if anything, about machine intelligence.
Does passing the Turing test mean the machine is actually thinking? Is it conscious? Or is it just really, really good at mimicking human conversation?
Exactly. And those questions have become even more pressing, more urgent even, with the rise of what we call large language models, or LLMs.
Yeah.
These things, they're incredibly powerful.
They are. And, thinking about how we typically test AI, it's often with very specific tasks, right? Almost like isolated challenges.
Right, those traditional benchmarks. It's like giving someone a multiple choice exam on a very narrow subject.
And yeah, the AI might ace those tests, but is it really demonstrating, understanding, reasoning, the kind of flexible intelligence we see in humans? Or is it just finding clever shortcuts, memorizing patterns,
It's a valid concern, and that's where the Turing test, with its open-ended interactive nature, it comes back into play.
Because the Turing test, it's like having a free-flowing conversation, right? The interrogator can ask anything, throw curveballs, and the AI has to think on its feet, maintain that natural back and forth.
Absolutely. It's a real test of those broader, more general capabilities that are much harder to assess with those rigid benchmarks.
So for our deep dive today, we're going to explore some really cutting-edge research that's asking that pivotal question. Can today's LLMs, these super advanced AI systems, can they actually pass a standard three-party Turing test?
And luckily, you've given me some really interesting sources to dive into, including a research paper that just that puts LLMs to the test in a very rigorous way.
And what's fascinating and a bit, maybe even unnerving, is that for the first time, we have evidence, real empirical data, suggesting that an AI system, specifically GPT 4.5, but with a twist, it was given a human-like persona. It actually outperformed humans at being judged as human in a controlled Turing test.
That's the headline, isn't it? It fooled people more often than the real human participant.
So let's jump right in. This study, tell us about how they actually set it up.
Okay, so they ran randomized controlled Turing tests, very carefully designed, and with two distinct groups of people. One group was undergrads, students at UC San Diego.
So young, tech-savvy, I imagine.
You would think so, right? The other group was recruited through Prolific, which is an online platform for research studies. So that group, much more diverse, broader range of ages, backgrounds.
But that's a smart move. Testing on different populations is a great way to see if the AI is truly generalizing, right? If it can fool different kinds of people.
Exactly. And they didn't stop there. They tested 4 different AI systems.
4. Okay, so a real head-to-head.
Yeah, it was a good mix. They had GPT 4.5, which at the time of the study, 2023, that was OpenAI's most advanced model. They also had Llama 3.1. That one's a powerhouse, open source, developed by Meta. This one came out a bit later, 2024.
I'm following along. So 2 cutting-edge models. What else did they throw into the mix?
They had GPT 4.0, another one from OpenAI at all. Same year, 2024.
Okay. And the 4th, don't tell me.
Eliza. Good old Eliza.
Eliza. Seriously, that takes me back. Like, way back.
1966, to be exact. That's when Eliza was created. It's a classic rule-based chatbot.
I remember reading about the Eliza effect, how people would start attributing real emotions, real understanding to this very simple program.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. But Eliza wasn't there to compete. It served as what we call a manipulation check, just making sure that the interrogators were paying attention, that they could tell a very basic AI from a real person.
Like a control group, almost, but for the humans.
Exactly. If Eliza was fooling people left and right, it would have been a red flag, a sign that something was off with the study design.
Right, makes sense. So we've got our AI contestants, but they didn't just let them loose in the Turing test arena without any instructions, did they?
No, they use different sets of what we call prompts, basically instructions for the LLMs. One was the no persona prompt. It was super minimal, just told the AI, You're in a Turing test. Your goal is to convince the interrogator you're human. But they did give the AI some context, background info. Like, for the prolific group, they'd mention details about how they get paid for the study. For the UCSD students, they'd include stuff about courses, campus news.
So trying to give the AI a little bit of common ground, the kind of knowledge that the humans would have.
Right. Trying to level the playing field a bit. And then they had the, I'd say, more intriguing prompt, the persona prompt.
This is where things get interesting. Tell us more about that one.
With this one, the AI was given detailed instructions to adopt a specific human-like persona. This persona, it was described as young, introverted, knowledgeable about internet culture, uses slang. They actually included the whole prompt in their paper, figure sex if you're curious, and it's pretty detailed.
So they were basically saying, AI, you're going undercover, you're going to be this particular type of person.
Exactly. And this wasn't just random. They chose this persona based on earlier tests where they tried out different prompts, different LLMs. This particular persona, seemed to work best at appearing human.
Like they were finding the AI's sweet spot for deception. All right, so different AI models, different prompts. What happened when they ran these Turing tests? What were the results?
Well, the key measure was what they called win rate, basically. How often the interrogator judged the AI as the human participant. And the findings, they're pretty remarkable. The GPT 4.5 system, the one with that persona prompt, it had an overall win rate of 73%. Pretty consistent across both groups. The undergrads were at 69%. The prolific group was at 76%.
So well above chance. It wasn't just luck. It was systematically fooling people.
Right. And here's the kicker. It was judged as human significantly more often than the actual human participants, meaning the AI was more convincingly human than a real person, at least in this specific setting.
That's a huge deal. That is a significant finding. What about the other models? How did they do?
Llama 3.1, also with the persona prompt, it did well too. Overall, win rate of 56%. Now, that wasn't statistically different from chance when you look at both groups combined, but in the prolific group, that one alone, Llama persona was at 65%, which was significantly above chance.
Interesting. Seems like that persona clicked with the prolific crowd. Maybe something about the diversity of that group. What happened when they used the no persona prompts?
Performance dropped quite a bit, actually. Both GPT 4.5 and Llama, with that minimal no persona prompt, they had win rates significantly below chance in the undergrad study.
So the college students were seeing through the facade more often than not.
Yeah, they were at like 27% and 26% respectively. Prolific group, they did a bit better, like 42% and 47%, but still not significantly above that 50% mark, which is basically just guessing. So the persona, it really made a difference. It's like the AI needed that human mask to be truly deceptive.
So the mask is crucial. What about GPT 4.0 without the persona? And, of course, our old friend Eliza. Did they manage to fool anyone?
Not really. Both of them had win rates significantly below chance in both groups. GPT 4.0 was at 21%, Eliza at 23%.
So the interrogators were generally pretty good at spotting those, which, that's good news, right? It means the test was working as intended. It could detect those simpler AIs.
Exactly. And the statistical analysis, it really focused on whether these win rates were significantly different from that 50% chance level, which is essentially random guessing.
And the fact that Eliza was so far below that, it kind of validates the findings with those more advanced models.
Yeah.
It tells us that the test was sensitive enough to pick up on those differences.
Right. And, we've been talking a lot about the persona prompt, how crucial it was for the LLMs to perform well. It raises an interesting philosophical point, doesn't it? Like, how much of the AI's behavior is really its own, and how much is it just a reflection of the human who wrote the prompt?
Or the data it was trained on, right? All those human conversations it's absorbed.
Precisely. And the researchers suggest that maybe that distinction, it's not that meaningful, at least in practice. I mean, even Eliza, as simple as it was, its ability to seem human, well, that came from the humans who programmed its rules.
Right, as a human creation all along.
And with these modern LLMs, the fact that they can be prompted so easily to adapt their behavior, that's a huge part of what makes them so versatile, and evidently so good at appearing human.
So it blurs the lines a bit, right? Between the AI's own capabilities and the human guidance it receives. Now, the study also looked at how those interrogators were trying to figure out who was who. What were some of the strategies they used?
Well, the most common one, it was just engaging in small talk, asking about everyday stuff, personal details. That was used in 61% of the interactions. About half of the interrogators also tried to probe social and emotional stuff, like asking for opinions, feelings, humor, personal experiences.
So like, how was your day? What are your thoughts on this? Kind of classic getting to know you stuff. Did that work? Was that effective at unmasking the AI?
Surprisingly, not really. Those were the most frequent tactics, but they weren't the most accurate. The things that actually helped the interrogators get it right, they were used less often, but they were more targeted, like saying something weird, something out of the blue, just to see how the participant would react.
Throwing a curveball, kind of like a conversational stress test?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the jailbreak prompts. These are specific questions designed to push the AI outside its comfort zone, to reveal its programming.
Ah, so trying to trick the AI into showing its true colors. And on the flip side, what were the least effective tactics?
Asking about the weather or general human experiences, that kind of stuff, which kind of counterintuitive, right? You'd think asking about everyday human things would be a good way to spot an AI, but it turns out not so much.
So sometimes the more mundane, the more human it seems, maybe. The study also looked at the reasons the interrogators gave for their decisions. What were they paying attention to?
The most common reasons, they were about linguistic style, like noticing typos or the use of, I guess, human-sounding phrasing. That was 27% of the responses. Then there was interactional dynamics, like whether the conversation flowed naturally or if someone was being evasive. That was 23%.
So really paying attention to how the conversation felt, the flow of it.
Right. And a lot of interrogators also just said they had a gut feeling. They couldn't really explain it, but something just felt off.
Ah, that intuition. So it wasn't always about deep analysis. Sometimes it was just a vibe. But were there any reasons that were more likely to lead to a correct judgment?
Yes. The ones that focused on how directly the participant answered the questions, and also when a participant seemed to lack knowledge about something. Which is funny, right? Because these LLMs, they're so knowledgeable, but it seems like sometimes pretending to be a little bit ignorant, it can actually make them more believable as human.
It's like playing dumb is the new smart. So the big question, based on this study, do LLMs pass the Turing test?
Well, if we go by the idea of indistinguishability, meaning if the interrogators can't reliably tell the difference, then the evidence from this study, it strongly suggests that, yeah, GPT 4.5 and Llama 3.1, at least when they're using those persona prompts, they do pass.
They're convincingly human.
They are. Now, the researchers do acknowledge that statistically passing means confirming a null result, meaning there's no significant difference from chance. But they point to Eliza's performance, how poorly it did, as evidence that their test was sensitive enough to pick up on differences when they were there. And the fact that GPT 4.5 persona actually outperformed humans, that's even more compelling, right?
It's not just matching human performance, it's surpassing it.
Yeah.
In terms of believability.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to have implications beyond the academic world, right? Like in the real world, what does it mean if these AIs are this good at blending in?
Absolutely. The fact that these LLMs can substitute for humans in short conversations without being detected, it has real social and economic consequences. Think about jobs that involve those short interactions. Customer service, online content moderation, even some forms of communication. These AI systems, they could automate those jobs, potentially displace real people. And, the paper mentions this idea of counterfeit people, a term coined by Dennett. It's a pretty unsettling thought, right?
Counterfeit people. It sounds like something out of science fiction, but it's not, is it?
It's becoming more and more real. Dennett, he raises some really important points. If we start interacting more and more with AI that we can't distinguish from humans, what happens to real human connection? It's like the critique of social media, right? Sometimes those online interactions, they replace real-world connections.
It's like a counterfeit version of human interaction.
Yep.
And who controls these AIs? Who benefits from them?
That's another big question. The entities that control these systems, they could have a lot of power to influence our thoughts, our behavior. And, just like counterfeit money can devalue real money, maybe these simulated interactions could end up devaluing real human connection.
It's a slippery slope. And the study also looked at how hard it is for us, regular people, to actually detect these AI deceptions.
Yeah, they looked at the participants' backgrounds, their knowledge of LLMs, how often they interacted with chatbots, and they found no consistent link to their accuracy in the Turing test.
So even if you think you're pretty tech savvy, you might not be as good as you think at spotting these advanced AIs.
Right, but they did find that certain strategies were more effective, like those jailbreak prompts. So maybe it's less about general knowledge and more about using those specific probing techniques.
Interesting. And, the researchers also offered a really thought-provoking perspective on what the Turing test is actually measuring. It's not just about intelligence anymore, is it?
Right. They argue that in today's world, with AI getting so good at those traditional measures of intelligence, logic, math, the thing that sets humans apart, it might be our social intelligence, our ability to communicate naturally, understand emotions, navigate those complex social dynamics.
So it's not just about thinking like a human, it's about interacting like a human. And that's where the Turing test, with its three-party setup, it becomes really relevant. The AI isn't just evaluated in isolation, it's directly compared to a real human.
Right. It has to be more convincing than the real deal. And, the paper ends with this great quote from Brian Christian. He says, the Turing test might not be the end goal. It might be a catalyst for us to become more human than ever.
I love that. As these AIs get closer and closer to mimicking us, we have to look inward and really understand what makes us unique, what makes us truly human. So for our listeners, the key takeaway here, this research shows, for the first time, an AI, specifically GPT 4.5, with a carefully crafted persona, it didn't just pass the Turing test, it aced it. It actually outperformed humans at being judged as human.
And while that's a huge milestone in AI, it opens up a whole can of worms, right? What does it really mean for an AI to be this convincing? What does it tell us about intelligence, about what it means to be human?
And what happens to our world as these AI systems get more and more sophisticated, more and more integrated into our lives? It's something we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. This research gives us all a lot to ponder.
It does. It makes you think about your online interactions, the future of work, your relationships, everything.
And it highlights how important it is to stay informed about these rapid advancements in AI.
Because this is not science fiction, this is happening now. So for everyone listening, here's a final thought to chew on. If AI can now mimic human interaction so convincingly, what does it mean for you to be human? How do you define your own humanity? It's a question worth exploring, and we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
Food for thought, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving.